A night of crystal and secrets. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Get comfortable because this story is about to unfold. The Fairmont Hotel ballroom glowed like a jewel box. Chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting thousands of sparkling reflections across champagne glasses and evening gowns. White roses climbed marble columns while silver candles flickered on every table. The charity gala was the event of the season, where Boston's elite gathered to see and be seen. A live orchestra played softly, their melodies weaving through conversations and laughter. Juliette Harmon sat alone at a corner table, trying to project confidence despite the knot in her stomach. Her emerald dress hugged her figure, and her heels made her feel taller than usual, though slightly unsteady. She barely knew anyone here except her best friend, the bride from last month's wedding, who was now dancing with her new husband under the photographer's flashes. The unexpected, Proposale woman's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Here all alone, dear?" The tone carried a hint of judgment. Juliette nodded politely, feeling the woman's gaze sweep over her from head to toe. At events like these, gossip flowed as freely as the wine. Arriving solo made you a target for whispers and speculation. Juliette sighed quietly and lifted her glass to hide discomfort. She was used to not caring what others thought, but tonight, surrounded by this glittering crowd, her solitude felt particularly obvious. She glanced at her watch. Only 8 o'clock. Too early to leave without seeming rude, just as she was about to stand and find a quiet corner. A tall figure appeared beside her table. He sat down with easy confidence, as if the seat had always been reserved for him. A perfectly tailored black suit, silver tie catching the light, and sharp features softened only by his penetrating gray eyes. His presence immediately drew attention. Juliette blinked in surprise when he leaned closer, his deep voice a whisper against her ear. "Pretend you're with me." She froze, her heart skipping a beat from surprise, or something more. "Excuse me?" She whispered back, pulling away slightly. He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on a group of guests several tables away. "They're gossiping. If you don't mind, let's make it look like we're together." She raised an eyebrow, irritated but curious. "And you think I'll just start playing girlfriend to a stranger?" He finally turned to face her. Those cold steel eyes weren't just stern but dangerously perceptive. He leaned slightly closer, and she caught the refined scent of sandalwood from his collar. "Just pretend. Trust me, you'll get rid of those judgmental looks, and I'll escape unwanted matchmaking. We both win." Playing the part, she bit her lip, hesitating. He was right. The stares that had been critical now turned curious. So the girl sitting alone does have a companion after all. She smiled slightly, half playful, half challenging. "How far are you planning to take this little game?" He raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth lifting in a barely visible smirk. "Leave that to me," casually placed his hand on the back of her chair, so naturally and intimately that several guests giggled behind their hands. Juliette straightened, feeling a jolt of tension run through her. Danger, her mind warned. This man was far too good at playing his role. "What's your name?" she asked with a hint of suspicion. "Blake Montgomery." The answer was short, confident, with no unnecessary explanation. Juliette's breath caught. That name was too familiar. The youngest CEO in the financial world, notorious for his cold, ruthless business tactics. Was she really pretending to be Blake Montgomery's girlfriend? She was about to say something when he gracefully poured her more wine. A perfect gentleman. "Relax, Juliette Harmon." He spoke her full name, and her heart skipped another beat. "You know me?" Her voice came out sharper than intended. Blake shrugged. "I have a good memory for noteworthy faces." He caught her gaze, so piercing she had to look away, feeling her breath quicken. Was it awkwardness, or something more dangerous? An evening of illusions, the rest of the evening transformed into a carefully choreographed performance. When guests approached, Blake introduced her as his chosen one with unwavering confidence. Though his eyes held a hint of irony, his voice sounded completely sincere. Juliette, despite feeling out of place, played along, smiling and nodding as if everything were perfectly natural. "What a beautiful couple you make," one lady remarked. Giving them a meaningful look, Juliette nearly laughed. I'm a journalist surviving on instant coffee and deadlines. And he's a self-assured, impeccably dressed business shark. But strangely, under those watchful eyes, the game no longer felt unbearable. Every time she stumbled in conversation, Blake smoothly covered for her with a quiet joke or skillful change of subject. She began to realize this wasn't just a game. It was something else, something far more dangerous, and perhaps far more captivating. "You're quite the actor," Juliet whispered when they stepped away for dessert. Blake looked at her, his lips twitching slightly. "Who said I was acting?" The brief response sparked something in her chest, and her cheeks flushed. In that moment, under the glow of lights and the rhythm of music filling the grand hall, they could easily have been mistaken for lovers, though they'd only met an hour ago. The air between them seemed charged with electricity, a mixture of playfulness and something inexplicably dangerous. Cracks in the ice, Juliet sipped her wine, trying to hide the smile tugging at her lips. "This is just a performance. Tomorrow, everything returns to normal," she told herself. But deep down she knew from the moment he whispered, "Pretend you're with me?" their story had already begun. Later in the evening, Blake surprised her by pausing in front of a painting in the gallery adjacent to the ballroom, a deep blue seascape. His voice suddenly changed, becoming softer. "My mother loved this shade of blue. She said it reminded her of the ocean near our home." Juliet's eyes widened. This was the first time he'd said anything truly personal. She looked at him. The coldness in his gaze had vanished. Something else was there now. Memory. Longing. "I didn't think you'd ever talk about family," she whispered. "I didn't think I'd say something like that to anyone here," he replied quietly, almost intimately in that instant. Juliet understood that beneath Blake's icy mask hid a man with secrets, pain, and feelings. And the sudden warmth inside her wasn't just an emotion. It was something that changed the rules of their game, the drive home in, the car on the way home. Silence settled between them. Juliet leaned back against the seat, her gaze falling on the invitation still tucked in her purse. These events opened doors to worlds she needed to access, especially the financial circles her newspaper was investigating. She repeated names and companies to herself, committing details to memory. She stole a glance at Blake. He sat by the window, calm and impenetrable. Involuntarily, her memory replayed his firm grip when he'd kept her from stumbling, and the look filled with shadowed pain when he'd mentioned his mother. Part of her wanted to believe in his innocence, but experience and instinct whispered otherwise. In the financial world, there are no clean hands. The thought made her chest tighten with an unfamiliar ache. "What's wrong?" Blake turned suddenly, catching her stare. Juliet quickly smiled, hiding her thoughts. "Nothing. Just thinking about what to wear tomorrow to look convincing as your girlfriend." He nodded, his lips twitching with that familiar half-smile. "Wear whatever makes you comfortable. I'll handle the rest." Juliet smiled back, though her heart beat with warning. This was all still a game. But if the game ever became real, she was certain their pretense would reach far beyond fancy receptions, where they held hands only for the sake of others' eyes, a dangerous beginning as they pulled up to her modest apartment building. Blake walked her to the door. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of late autumn leaves. Street lamps cast long shadows across the pavement. "Thank you for tonight," Juliet said, clutching her small purse. "I have to admit, you made an unbearable evening almost enjoyable." "Almost." Blake's eyebrow arched. "Well, you're still a stranger who commandeered my evening," she teased. Though her smile was genuine, a stranger who saved you from judgmental stares and boring conversations. He countered. She laughed softly, the sound carrying in the quiet night. For a moment, they simply stood there, the playful banter fading into something more serious. "Juliet," Blake said, his voice dropping lower. "I know this started as a convenience, but I meant what I said earlier. I need someone smart and strong who won't become tabloid fodder. My board and shareholders are pressuring me about my personal life. It's affecting business, or at least the perception of it." "So you want to continue this charade?" she asked, though she'd already guessed as much. "Yes, I'll make it worth your while. Respect, consideration, and access to events that could benefit your career." No strings attached, and either of us can end it whenever we want. Juliet studied his face, seeing the sincerity beneath the business proposition. This was also her chance to get closer to the financial scandal she'd been investigating. Information that could make her career. "I have one condition," she said firmly. "I can walk away the moment you become unbearably boring." Blake laughed quietly, the sound unexpectedly warm, like ice cracking under sunlight. "Deal, and I reserve the right to end this if you become a disaster for my reputation. The only disaster here is your overly perfect suit. Every woman looks at you like I'm clinging to you desperately, and I'll look at you in a way that makes them believe the opposite." She swallowed hard. This man had a talent for pulling the ground out from under her feet. Juliet extended her hand. "Temporary arrangement, then." His palm closed over hers, firm and warm. "Just pretend, Harmon." "Yes, pretend," she repeated, though inside she felt she'd just stepped into a dangerous game. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she could feel his eyes on her back. Only when she heard his car pull away did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Inside, she leaned against the closed door, her heart still racing. This was supposed to be simple. Attend a gala, gather information, go home. Instead, she'd agreed to become the fake girlfriend of one of Boston's most powerful men. A man who might be connected to the very crimes she was investigating. Juliet touched her lips, remembering the way he'd looked at her when he mentioned his mother. That hadn't been acting. That had been real. And that's what scared her most. Because if Blake Montgomery could make her feel this much when they were just pretending, what would happen when the lines between fake and real began to blur? She pushed away from the door and headed to her bedroom, already knowing sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Tomorrow, their arrangement would truly begin. Tomorrow, she'd step deeper into his world, gathering evidence while playing the role of devoted girlfriend. "Just a game," she whispered to the empty room. But her reflection in the mirror showed the truth in her eyes. This was already more than a game, and she'd only just begun to play. The agreement takes shape 3 days after the gala. Juliet stood outside her newspaper office when a sleek black Mercedes pulled smoothly to the curb. The window lowered, revealing Blake's familiar profile. Her heart skipped. "Don't tell me you're here for the morning paper." He glanced at his watch, his voice low and steady. "If you're not too busy, I need just 5 minutes." "Sounds like a political interview," she said with a smirk, but opened the door and slid inside anyway. The luxurious interior made her worn heels feel especially out of place. He didn't waste time. "Remember what I said at the gala?" Juliet tilted her head. "Hard to forget, considering I nearly choked on fake smiles in front of those ladies." A shadow of amusement crossed his face. "The thing is, shareholders and journalists are starting to pressure me. They don't like that I have no girlfriend, no family presence. Stock prices aren't dropping, but rumors are getting annoying." "And you want me to keep pretending?" she asked directly. "Exactly. I need someone intelligent and strong who won't become a media circus. And honestly, you handled that role too well." Juliet laughed. "Funny to hear. Instead of you're beautiful, it's you're an excellent actress." "Both statements are true," he replied calmly. The cabin filled with tension. Juliet understood she should refuse. She had no time to play someone's fake girlfriend. But a thought flickered, and her journalist instinct sharpened. If she agreed, she could access the upper circles. Right into the center of the financial scandal her paper was investigating, negotiating terms and what compensation for this role, she asked, resting her chin on her palm. "Respect, discretion, and certain conveniences," he said without hesitation. "Juliet Harmon doesn't come cheap." She narrowed her eyes playfully. "I want the right to leave any minute if you turn out to be unbearably dull." He laughed quietly, unexpectedly warm, as if ice had cracked under sunshine. "Agreed, and I keep the right to end this if you become a reputation catastrophe. The only catastrophe here is your too perfect wardrobe. Every woman stares like I've latched onto you desperately. Then I'll look at you in ways that make them believe otherwise." She swallowed. This man knew how to unsettle her. Juliet extended her hand. "Temporary deal, then?" His palm closed around hers, firm and warm. "Just keep pretending, Harmon." "Yes, pretending," she echoed. though inside she felt she'd just stepped onto dangerous ground. Entering his world the very next day, their arrangement faced its first test. Blake brought Juliet to a charity evening. The venue sparkled with elegance and wealth. "You sure about this?" New heels. "I might stumble right on the red carpet," she said nervously. "If you fall, I'll carry you," he stated matter-of-factly. "You realize phrases like that make it hard for me to concentrate?" "Exactly. That's the plan." He offered his hand like a gentleman from another era. Inside the hall, all eyes turned toward them. Whispers filled the space. "Blake Montgomery has a girlfriend. Who is she?" Juliet took a deep breath and smiled brilliantly, as if playing undercover investigator. Blake leaned closer, his voice sliding past her ear. "Your smile tonight is much better than at the wedding. Try one yourself, instead of that icy mask," she whispered back. He lifted the corners of his mouth slightly. "Just a hint." Juliet caught that look, and her heart trembled. That half-smile was more dangerous than any financial scheme. The evening unfolded smoothly, and to her surprise, they handled it brilliantly. Blake held her hand, introducing her to partners, while she fielded press questions with ease. It truly seemed as if she were his secret lover. Family introductions when the event finally ended. They sank into the car seats, both exhaling with relief. "I'll admit, Juliet," he said, "you really are a natural actor." Blake adjusted his tie without looking away from the window. "For outsiders, I need to be cold. But with you, I don't have to try so hard." Juliet fell silent. She turned away, hiding the smile that threatened to betray her lips. "Inside," she whispered to herself, "careful, Harmon. This little game might stop being just a game." In the following days, Juliet's name began circulating in high society circles. Not because she was a sharp, perceptive financial journalist. No, it was because she'd suddenly become Blake Montgomery's girlfriend. Sometimes she asked herself, "How did I even get into this?" But every time she looked in the mirror and saw an evening gown borrowed from her sister and the gold-embossed invitation tucked neatly in her purse, she reminded herself, this is an opportunity. Play the role, but observe. Maybe you'll expose someone after all. On Friday evening, Blake took her somewhere unexpected. Not to another gala, but to his family estate, just outside the city. The old mansion stood graceful and imposing, with white stone walls, flowering gardens, and a pond reflecting the sky. "Why did you bring me here?" Juliet asked, half serious. "To test if I'm afraid of haunted mansions." "To introduce you to the person I trust most," he answered. She froze. The person he trusts most, a young woman, appeared, with soft chestnut hair and bright eyes that sparkled with warmth. "This is Cassidy, my sister," Blake introduced. Cassidy smiled genuinely. "So you're Juliet? Finally meeting my brother's mystery girlfriend?" Juliet's cheeks burned. She almost blurted out, "It's not real," but Blake's hand gently touched her back in warning. "That's right," he said in an unusually soft voice. "Juliet is special to me." Her heart lurched. Was he serious, or just performing for his sister? Dangerous Discoveries dinner turned out unexpectedly cozy. Cassidy shared childhood stories. Juliet laughed, and Blake even teased both his sister and her. It felt as though she truly were his secret beloved. When Cassidy left to get dessert, Juliet whispered, "You're making me feel like a real girlfriend." Blake's gaze darkened, deepened. "Maybe that's exactly what I want." Her breath caught. She grabbed her glass, hiding the blush creeping up her neck. Late that night, back in her apartment, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Blake, the sharp suit, slight smile, his voice saying, "Maybe that's exactly what I want." She opened her laptop, forcing herself to work, but instead of numbers, those words echoed in her mind. "God, Montgomery, what are you doing to me?" The next day, while reviewing archived files accessible through her journalist's credentials, Juliet stumbled across a document that stole her breath. A report on money transfers. Massive sums flowing from questionable sources to subsidiary accounts in Europe. At the bottom, a familiar signature. Blake Montgomery. Juliet froze. Her fingers trembled as she enlarged the image. Yes, his handwriting. Bold, confident strokes. "It can't be," she whispered. Her heart clenched painfully. If this was true, then the man who'd just introduced her to his sister was involved in money laundering. But what if it was forged? What if someone used his name? Her mind spun in chaos. What should she do? The gift and the guilt after lunch, Blake called unexpectedly. "I have some time. Want to take a walk?" She almost refused, but something in his voice was light, sincere, almost personal. She agreed. They strolled along the waterfront. The sunset painted the water gold. Suddenly, Blake stopped and handed her a small box. "A gift?" Juliet squinted. "With a bug inside." He smirked. "Just a pen. Thought a journalist might need it." She opened the box. Indeed, an elegant fountain pen with her name engraved. Juliet held it in her palm, and her heart squeezed painfully with both warmth and guilt. He trusted her, and she held a dangerous secret. She forced herself to laugh. "This gift sounds like pressure, as if you're signing me to a contract as permanent girlfriend." Blake tilted his head, his voice dropping low. "What if that's exactly what I want?" Juliet didn't answer. Inside, a war raged between justice and love. That night, she couldn't sleep again. The pen lay on her desk, gleaming under the lamp. On her laptop screen, the transfer reports still glowed. On one side, a warm gift. On the other, evidence that could destroy Blake. "Congratulations, Montgomery," she whispered with bitter irony. "You've made me the heroine of a tragedy you wrote yourself." The room's silence was broken only by the ticking clock as her heart beat in chaos. Her sleepless nights were only beginning. Pressure mounts. A week dragged by like a tightrope walk over an abyss. The slightest gust could mean falling. Every morning, her editor called her into his office. A room piled with folders, glasses sliding down his nose, his voice cold and demanding. "Juliet, you already have the scanned signature? What are you waiting for?" "The documents aren't fully verified yet, sir." She swallowed her words. The editor slammed his palm on the desk. "We can't wait. Other publications are digging into this. If you don't submit material within 2 days, I'm giving it to Roberts. He'll turn Blake Montgomery into Wall Street's predatory wolf in 500 words. Is that what you want?" Juliet went numb. Roberts was ruthless, merciless, cutting with words like knives. In his hands, Blake would be torn apart without the slightest mercy. Her heart screamed, no one should write about him like that. But her mind whispered, this is journalism. Justice doesn't wait. Juliet clenched her fists and nodded. Fine, I'll write it. But I need time to polish everything. The editor looked at her as if seeing right through her. 1 week, not a day more. Otherwise, you'll lose not just the story, but possibly your job. Juliet left the office, her legs feeling like lead. She wanted to scream, but only had strength for a heavy exhale that made her lungs ache. The breaking point that evening in her apartment. She stared at her laptop screen. A blank page. Blinking cursor. An hour passed. Not a single word. She pressed her palm to her chest. Harmon, what are you doing? Professional instinct commanded her to write, but her heart refused. Blake didn't look like a greedy, soulless man involved in money laundering. Yet his signature, his name. Juliet ran her hands through her hair, laughing nervously. Dry, bitter. Justice and love. Great. You chose 2 eternal enemies. She opened her closet. Her gaze fell on the box with the pen. Blake's gift. Such a small thing, yet it squeezed her heart. If he was innocent, one wrong article could destroy him. If guilty, this love would become her most painful mistake. The next day, whispers spread through the newsroom. They say Harmon has a bomb about Montgomery. Think she'll publish? Hope Roberts doesn't grab it. If he writes it, Montgomery's finished. Juliet pressed her lips together. Something clicked inside her. No, Roberts won't get this. If anyone writes the article, it'll be her. At least then, she'd buy some time. She walked into the editor's office, her voice steady and calm. I'll write it. The story stays with me. Satisfaction flickered across the editor's face. Excellent. 1 week. Not a minute's delay. Juliet left the office, her heart pounding like mad. She'd just signed her own sentence. But now she had time and a chance to talk to Blake. Confrontation and confession that evening. She sat on her bed with her phone in hand. Her finger hovered over his name. She typed, "We need to talk about your company." Deleted it. "I have important information." Deleted again. Damn it. I sound like a teenager confessing a crush. Not a journalist preparing to drop an investigation. She exhaled, smirking at herself. Breathe in, breathe out. She typed, "We need to meet in person." The response came in less than a minute. "Tomorrow evening, my office." Juliet gripped the phone. Her heart plummeted, then raced wildly. Tomorrow, everything would explode. That night, sleep never came. She tossed and turned, switching sides. A hurricane raged in her mind. Before her eyes, Blake by the window, his warm gaze, conversations about his mother, and that cursed report with his signature. She buried her face in the pillow. Why hasn't anyone invented sleeping pills for journalists falling for their own investigation subjects? Silence filled the room, only the ticking clock. But one thing she knew for certain. Tomorrow, she'd face a choice. And that choice might shatter both her heart and her career. Morning came with bright sunshine, but for her it felt filtered through smoke. She took a bitter sip of coffee when her phone screen lit up. "Come downstairs." "I'm waiting," her heart dropped. Before she could think, someone knocked on her door. She had no doubt who it was. Blake Montgomery. He stood at her threshold, tall and unshakable. His face looked carved from ice. Eyes cold without a hint of previous warmth. He resembled a storm barely restrained by sheer willpower. "Blake," she breathed out. "Don't say my name like you have that right." His voice was low, hoarse, each word like a blade. "You got close to me for an article, didn't you?" It felt like she'd been pierced through. "I trusted you, Juliet. I told you about my mother, about the future. I even introduced you to Cassidy." His voice hardened. "And you're a journalist investigating my company?" Juliet struggled to breathe. Her hands trembled. "Yes. At first I approached you for that. I'm a reporter. I found irregularities in the reports and decided it was worth pursuing. So I'm the main villain? The greedy CEO without conscience?" Blake's voice struck like thunder. She bit her lip, tears stinging her eyes, but she wouldn't let them fall. "I don't know. I have evidence with your signature. I can't ignore it. But," she threw back, her voice shaking, "but I can't ignore my feelings either. I'm torn between conscience and heart. I don't want to believe you're guilty, but I can't just close my eyes." Silence crashed down like a hammer. Only her wild pulse. Blake stared at her, pain and anger in his eyes. All the smiles, the touches, the kiss, was that part of your job too? Juliet shook her head desperately. "No. Maybe it all started that way. But then I really felt something. Believe me. Please believe me." His laugh was icy. "I became a joke. A man who trusted no one became the victim of a reporter's trap. Blake, please, listen to me." He turned away, his voice ragged and hoarse. "We're done. I don't want to see you again. I saved you only because I don't want blood on my hands. That's all." Her chest tightened with pain. "You don't believe me?" He laughed bitterly, an icy sound. "You hid, you betrayed. You let the world make me a laughingstock. And now you want me to believe you?" Each word felt like a blow. She almost pulled the documents from her bag, wanted to scream, "I have proof." But his gaze was like a concrete wall, impenetrable. He turned and walked to his car, his silhouette retreating, growing smaller, disappearing into the distance. Juliet stood frozen like a statue. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks. "You don't believe me, but I'll prove it. I'll write this article. I'll make the world know the truth. Even if you never want to see me again." That night, she returned home, opened her laptop, and with trembling fingers began typing. She knew Richard Townsend wouldn't stop. She knew she was risking her career and possibly her life. But this was the only path. The path to truth, to justice for Blake and for her broken heart. Outside, the city still sparkled, but for Juliet, everything had plunged into darkness. The darkness of danger, loss, and love torn apart. The Truth Emerges Juliet's article went live on Monday morning while the city still slept. The headline wasn't sensational, but every word struck precisely. Who really stands behind the Montgomery scandal? The truth about forged signatures. She detailed how suspicious financial operations occurred, pointed out signs of forgery, presented her evidence. Richard Townsend was the real puppet master. She wrote as a journalist, but every word came from a woman who refused to betray the man she loved. His life could have been destroyed by false accusations. The moment the article published, the city erupted. News agencies grabbed the sensation instantly. Montgomery's stock stopped falling, and Blake himself, who yesterday was considered a criminal, suddenly appeared in a different light. An innocent man. A victim. But Richard wouldn't surrender easily. The kidnapping, that same day.
Ow.
When Juliet left the newspaper office, a black car sharply blocked her path. Everything happened too fast. A cloth pressed against her face, soaked with chemical smell. Darkness swallowed her. She woke tied to a chair in an abandoned warehouse. Before her sat Richard, his gaze cold, his voice smooth but venomous. "Miss Harmon, you've disappointed me. I warned you. Yet you went too far." Juliet bit her lip, her heart pounding. "Are you really so afraid of the truth?" Richard smirked. "Truth only exists as long as the person holding it stays alive. You'll delete all the originals." He raised his hand. A knife glinted in the lamplight. Juliet swallowed but kept her voice firm despite its tremor. "I'd rather die than let you keep staining Montgomery's name." Richard's eyes narrowed. "I hate stubborn people." The rescue meanwhile, Blake had already received a message from a witness. Juliet was seen being dragged into a car. He rushed out, coordinating with police. His car screeched to a halt at the warehouse. When the tactical team burst inside, Blake was first through the door. Juliet. Richard jerked, pressing the knife to her throat. One more step, and she dies right here.
Oh, Blake's heart stopped.
Images flashed before his eyes. Juliet's defiant smile, her warm gaze, the moment she almost fell in those heels. "Let her go, Townsend. Don't drag yourself deeper into this mess." Blake's voice was hoarse but burned with intensity. Richard gripped the knife tighter. But for a moment he was distracted as police closed the circle. That was enough. Blake lunged forward, yanking Juliet away and pulling her against him. Pushing her from the blade's path, a shot rang out. Richard was tackled and handcuffed. Juliet went limp. Blood seeped from a cut on her arm. Blake pressed her against him, his icy mask crumbling to reveal genuine, agonizing fear. "Juliet, don't close your eyes. Do you hear me?" She struggled to open her eyelids, her lips pale. "Blake, do you believe me now?" He squeezed her hand painfully, his voice shaking. "Don't say anything. I believe you. Just don't leave me." The ambulance arrived. They lifted her onto a stretcher. Recovery and reconciliation. 2 days later, Juliet woke in a hospital room. Sunlight streamed through white curtains. Her arm was bandaged and she felt weak but alive. By her bedside sat Blake. His tie was loosened, shirt wrinkled, eyes red from exhaustion. When he saw her open her eyes, relief flooded his face. "Awake," he said softly, almost reverently. "How long was I out?" Her voice came out raspy. 2 days. "The doctor said you lost blood, but you'll recover fully." He took her hand gently. "Juliet, I'm sorry. I should have believed you from the start." She smiled weakly. "You had every reason not to. I did investigate you. I did hide things. But you also risked your life to clear my name." His thumb traced circles on her hand. "When I saw Richard holding that knife to you, I realized something. Nothing matters more than you. Not my company, not my reputation. Just you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Blake, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted the truth. I know that now." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "Can you forgive me for not trusting you?" Only if you forgive me for not being honest from the beginning. Deal, he whispered, and kissed her softly. New beginnings. A week later, Juliet was discharged from the hospital. The city had transformed around them. Richard Townsend faced multiple charges, including fraud, forgery, attempted murder, and money laundering. The evidence Juliet had gathered, combined with what authorities uncovered, built an ironclad case. Montgomery Financial Group began its recovery. Blake held a press conference, thanking Juliet publicly for her courage and integrity. The media, which had been ready to crucify him days earlier, now praised both of them. On a quiet Sunday evening, Blake took Juliet back to the waterfront where he'd given her the pen. The sunset painted everything golden, just like before. But now, everything felt different, Blake said. When this all started, I asked you to pretend to be my date. I remember, Juliet smiled. Best fake relationship I've ever had. What if we stopped pretending? He turned to face her fully. What if we made this real? Her heart soared. Are you asking me to be your actual girlfriend, Blake Montgomery? I'm asking you to be everything. My partner, my confidant, the person I trust most in this world? His eyes, once so cold, now burned with warmth. I'm asking you to stop pretending and just be with me. For real this time, Juliet felt tears of joy prick her eyes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He pulled her close and kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Epilogue, 6 months. Later, the Boston Herald conference room buzzed with excitement. Juliet stood at the front, presenting her investigative series on financial corruption. Her work had earned her a promotion to senior investigative journalist and several industry awards in the back row. Blake sat quietly, pride evident on his face. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and he gave her a small, private smile that made her heart flutter just like it had that first night. After the presentation, they walked out together, hand in hand. Dinner tonight, Blake asked. I'm thinking that little Italian place you love. It's the one where you can't pronounce half the menu. She teased. Exactly that one. I'll embarrass myself ordering, and you'll laugh at me. It's become our tradition. She squeezed his hand. Sounds perfect. As they walked through the city streets, Juliet thought back to that night at the gala when a stranger had whispered, "Pretend you're with me." She'd never imagined those 5 words would change her entire life. Sometimes the best love stories began with a lie, but they survived because 2 people chose truth, even when it was painful, even when it was dangerous, even when it meant risking everything. Blake had asked her to pretend, and in pretending, they'd discovered something real, something worth fighting for, something worth believing in. Their love story had begun with deception, survived betrayal, and emerged stronger through honesty. And now, walking together through the city they both called home, neither of them had to pretend anymore. This was real. This was theirs. And this was just the beginning.